Hey there YouTube, I'm Yukitsu, this is the Yukitsu Times, welcome to my channel, welcome to a little bit of Battlefleet Gothic Armada 2. So, today we're going to be talking a little bit about the Craftworld Eldar, and we're going to start off by talking about their sort of starting abilities and skills and how to play them when you start off. Now, this isn't actually going to be all that different from the way you play these once you get up to level 10 with them, and the reason is that they start off with a fairly complete list of things at their disposal. They don't really need anything else. So let's take a look at what they got here. You've got the Wraithbone Probe. This is actually a pretty decent ability for them. Throw it into gas clouds or whatever if you feel like you need to. Use it to scout out a little bit. It's actually in some ways more important for these guys because you're probably not going to take very many escorts, if you take any escorts at all. Disruption Bomb here. Always a solid sort of pick under most circumstances there, just for shredding through enemy shields and stuff like that. Pretty good. I don't necessarily find it super necessary for these guys because shields are not their gigantic concern. Stasis Bomb, this is a good all-rounder, sort of a common thing to use just for anybody, good sort of ability. And these are going to be sort of the three solid ones that no matter what level, they're just going to be good. They're never going to be amazing or anything like that, but they're always going to be good. Next up, you got the Augur Disruptor Bomb. I don't think this is the right faction for this necessarily. You have to be in the stance and you have to take particular ships to make use of the Augur Disruptor Bomb. And because of that, I just generally find it's not that good. You're also going to still get marked by enemy ships pretty easily who are just going to use the scanner ability anyhow. It's not an amazing ability for the Craftworld Eldar. It works better for fleets that inherently go for stealth strategies. Now, you can go for a stealth strategy with the Craftworld Eldar. If you can bait out the scanners and you can do something to get rid of the Wraithbone probes or the Augur probes or whatever, if you can get rid of the fighter screens, there's a lot of things out there that could potentially still put vision on you other than the Augur detection. It's kind of not a great ability there. There are ways to definitely use it, but again, not my favorite. Micro Warp Jump is not available at the start, so we're going to ignore that. Same with the Dire Avenger Honor Guard. We're going to ignore. So all of those abilities, generally speaking, I like taking the Disruption Bomb, the Stasis Bomb. The reason being that the Wraithbone Probe is more for if you intend to keep your distance against your enemy. The Craftworld Eldar are unique amongst the Eldar in that they do not mind getting into a brawl against their opponents. The exceptions of this, of course, are if they're up against like the Tyranids or something like that, or if they're up against Orcs, or if they're up against Space Marines. Everything else, they're not too afraid of getting into broadside range and just exchanging shots. In fact, I would say that they're better at just getting in beside someone and exchanging shots than any other fleet in the game because of the fact that they've got the hollow fields. And if they're doing broadsides with hollow fields, that combination is just gross. Anyhow, next up we got the Polarized Field. This allows them to sort of chase through terrain and to use the terrain to their advantage. It also allows them to re-stealth a little bit more frequently than they might otherwise be able to, or at least to do so cheaper. So this is an okay upgrade. I actually think this is pretty good for the Craftworld Eldar since they typically lack that kind of stealth aspect that other Eldar are able to take advantage of. This lets them sort of use it to a certain extent there. Void Predator, I don't really think this one's worth it. It makes it so that you've kind of got a mini hollow field when you're in gas clouds, but only against macro weapons. This is kind of good because it stacks with that sort of void or the hollow field or whatever. And if you're in this really weird kind of fight where a small number of your ships are fighting in a gas cloud at point blank range against another ship that's also in the gas cloud, and they're sort of circling each other and somehow not bumping into a whole bunch of other ships because there's like 15 ships in the gas cloud all sort of clustered together, like in that sort of instance, then Void Predator would be good, but it's a very fringe situation. Otherwise, you're going to be in the gas cloud, he's going to be out of the gas cloud, you'll be firing at him, he can't see you. So you don't need this, or you're going to be in the gas cloud and you're going to be trying to move while you're using the hollow field because the hollow field's better than Void Predator. And you're kind of getting in this weird situation where as you're moving, you're sort of like getting out of the gas cloud quite often or bumping into things and taking damage because you keep ramming your own ships and stuff like that. It's a very situational and very not great bonus in my opinion. Kin-Crude Batteries, this is more of a Dark Eldar upgrade, but it's still pretty good in the case of the Craftworld Eldar. Extra fire rate on your weapons by a decent amount if you just sort of have them on reload stance and are just firing away at a single enemy ship. I don't particularly like this upgrade because it sort of forces you to stand there and fire, which is not really what you're after, but the Craftworld Eldar are actually quite durable, so they can make use of this if they're going for that sort of macro build where they just sort of have their ships spread out different spots there and are folks firing an enemy ship there. They turn up their rate of fire up to 11. It's a total of 65% extra damage if you get the full 25 seconds off with this. So You're capable of just dealing a huge amount of damage through the kin crewed batteries because it does stack with the reload stance. So, but I honestly think that you're better off staying mobile and staying defensive, in my opinion. Accelerated batteries, this applies only to the flagship. They do not have a good flagship to apply this to, so I would not really recommend that one. Spirit Stone targeting node, while in the runic targeting node stands the range of Star Cannon, last cannon size missiles increased by 4,500. This is actually a really good upgrade. It's the one that you would take against things like, say, Tyranids if you needed to keep your distance while still being able to dish out macro battery fire. Same thing if you're against orcs. You're going to want to be able to sort of circle around the enemy fleet while still firing, and the runic targeting node stance allows you to do that, and having that combined with the Spirit Stone targeting node allows you to do that from a further distance, so you can kite away much, much more effectively, because those fleets you generally don't want to be stuck in close quarters combat with them for a duration of any sort, really. Now, last up we got the one that we're not going to talk about because we don't unlock that early on. Let's talk about the actual ships here. So, this is what I would call a one-dimensional fleet, and you can play it in one of sort of like combinations of, I guess, 3 different ways here. So the first way is you just torpedo stuff. This is the one that I generally recommend. You're going to go for a heavy torpedo build, and you're just going to blow things up. Now, in my opinion, they've ordered the ships in the order of best to worst. So that's very convenient as a mnemonic. Just pick the stuff at the top there. It's the best ships in whatever class. The exception, of course, are the escorts, and of course the battle cruisers. There's only one option there, and there's no grand cruisers and no battleship. So this is the only faction in the game where I would not recommend taking any escort ships. Their escort ships require a lot of micro to get the most out of. Too much, in my opinion, for them to be worthwhile. The Destroyer Shadowhunter has a 2 damage per second lance weapon. This looks pretty okay on paper, but the reality is that something like a Firestorm costs just about half as much as a Shadowhunter and has more firepower than it by a decent amount. Now, what makes the Shadowhunter particularly bad is it's got that very narrow cone of fire, forward firing. So this thing is going to, typically speaking, have a real rough time moving to keep its holofields up while also firing its weapon. It's just going to get bumped into by something and explode. The Shard Shadowhunter, on the other hand, has a little bit more potential. If you've got it on runic targeting stance, it'll fire from its broadside and just sort of circle around the enemy ship there from that 9,000 distance. It's got 6 damage per second from its light last cannon artillery, and mix that with the holofield and 67 armor. If you keep the holofields up the entire time it's sort of rotating around the enemy, this is actually a fairly solid ship against certain matchups. Against things like Necrons, it'll just immediately explode, but that's besides the point. This would potentially be okay. 6 damage per second on something that is really annoying and difficult to kill for a lot of ships is not the worst thing in the world. However, if you lose micro of it for a second and it bumps into something, or the enemy's fleet shifts, or the target that you've got it set to ends up being on the opposite side of the fleet and you bump into the back end of the fleet, this thing explodes just as quickly, and it costs 85 points. It's not actually got great damage per second for an 85 cost escort, so I definitely don't really recommend these guys. You would normally think that you have to have these sort of things for capping power and for these scanners, but I tend to find that that's not actually the case for this particular fleet, because unlike with other Eldar, you're not worried about the enemy sneaking up close to you because you want to get close to them as well. So if he's sneaking in to get close to you, good on him. You've got the ability to sort of just wall up on his fleets, and if he's not trying to get in close to you and he's just trying to run away constantly, you can just cap points and potentially figure out where he is eventually once he starts trying to recap them from you. Destroy whatever's trying to do the capping, and you're good to go. So for the light cruisers, the best combination is always going to be the one with the last cannon artillery and the torpedo launcher. Blast cannon is better than the pulsars, torpedoes are better than carrier bays, and they sort of have those... The way these ships are designed is that you're either going to get torpedoes or you're going to get carrier bays, and you're going to have last cannon artillery or you're going to have pulsars. And that's the way all their ships are designed. You've got the sort of different combinations that you can possibly get. So Prismatic Wraith ship has the best combination, the last cannon artillery and the torpedo launchers. It's an incredibly agile ship. You're able to sort of maneuver it really quickly, effectively. It's got decent armor. It's got a 16 damage macro battery sort of volley. It's a humongous amount of damage from these last cannon artillery shots. 16 damage per second, I should say, since it's got 4 of them. This is more than like the Dauntless by a decent enough margin that this 172 cost, even if you weren't using the hollow fields, this thing would still outtrade something like a Dauntless. Very powerful sort of ship in that sense there, and it's better at using the torpedoes than that. Next up is the Ghost Wraith ship. Still has that really good last cannon artillery. The reason I don't think that this is worth it is it costs 206 points and it only has 1 launch bay. One launch bay, even though Eldar ships are a little bit better in terms of its characteristics than other fleets, that's a really trashy deal. You're not going to actually be able to kill anything with the one launch bay. What's typically going to happen is they're still going to be able to turret them down too much for them to deal very much damage. They're going to have enemy fighters that are going to contend with them potentially. It's just not really a great value. If you had 2 bays on the Ghost Wraith ship, even then I would say that it's only a good ship, because you're looking at something that's got kind of, well, actually no, 206 points for 2 bays, it would be a very, very good ship, considering how agile and capable of getting in and out of fights it would be. But at the same time, just one launch bay, it does not have the ability to sort of swing fights in your favor at all. Next up is the Firestorm Wraith ship. It's good because it's got the torpedo launchers. It's bad because it's got the pulsar cannon beam. I would rather have the Ghost Wraith ship over the Firestorm Wraith ship, because the macro cannons here, the last cannon artillery, is at least decent. The problem I have with the pulsar cannons is that you can come in for an alpha strike against an enemy ship there, but by the time you've got their shields down, you've kind of run out of juice there. You turn back around, you wait 20 seconds, you get another shot right off, but the shields are back up in 20 seconds. So what did that actually accomplish? So not actually really all that good of a ship, in my opinion. I think that the mechanics for the pulsars are just really janky. I think that there's plenty of things that they need to do to fix pulsars to make them more viable, and I think that that would make not only the Craftworld Eldar more internally diverse, more interesting to play their entire roster, but this would be the fix that makes the Corsair Eldar actually viable, because the Corsairs rely on those hit-and-run pulsar cannons much, much more than the Craftworld Eldar. The Craftworld Eldar are amazing and powerful because they're so able to trade broadsides using that last cannon artillery. If you had to hit and run with the last cannon artillery, it would still be trash, because hitting and running with that kind of weapon doesn't really allow you to deal very much damage. But since they're capable of just standing alongside ships going toe-to-toe with them, that's what makes the Craftworld Eldar viable. The Corsair Eldar need to have something that's good for hit and run, and that's supposed to be the pulsars. So the Firestorm Wraith ship, just not very good because it's got that pulsar cannon beam that just doesn't deal enough damage under normal circumstances for it to really be amazing. The only time that these things are really worth it is when you get enemy ships that don't have shields, or you're capable of permanently disabling their shields. These things are so, so bad if you find yourself fighting against Tyranids, because you can't disable their shields. It's just the worst. Lastly, you've got the Moonray Wraith ship. It's got a very high price tag. It's got the pulsar beam cannons, and it's got the launch bays. Really, really bad there. Next up, we got the Starfall Dragon ship in the cruiser tier. So this looks on paper like it's just got a tougher version of the Prismatic Wraith ship, but oh boy, would you be wrong. So heavy last cannon artillery instead of the last cannon artillery. 28 damage per second broadside from the Starfall Dragon ship. This is just crazy. This is basically the same amount of firepower that you get in something like the Vengeance, firing from both broadsides simultaneously. The heavy last cannon artillery fired from this thing is just grotesque in terms of how much damage you can be doing with this thing. Next up, you've got 8 torpedoes per launch instead of 4. This is a grotesque amount of damage coming out of this as well. The 8 torpedo spread there is what you generally get out of battleships that have torpedoes. There is very little that can actually survive getting hit by 8 torpedoes in this game and feeling good about it. It's just a humongous, grotesque amount of damage that's going to shred people. It's going to make people just wish that they had never been born. It's just an amazing ship. Honestly speaking, I think that the Prismatic Wraith ship and the Starfall Dragon ship are a little bit overpowered and make the faction a little bit overpowered, but if you nerfed them too much, or even at all, the problem that you're going to encounter is that the other stuff can't pick up the slack, because some of the other stuff is absolutely abjectly worthless. Next up, we got the Ghost Dragon ship here. It's got the launch base. It's actually got 2 launch bays, and it's got the heavy last cannon artillery. 28 damage out of the last cannon artillery. So this is actually a fairly respectable battle carrier type thing. The amount of damage that their broadside value is bringing to the table is so high that the fact that it's got only 2 carrier bays is kind of acceptable. You're able to sort of brawl it out, and you've got way, way, way more carry capacity than you would be if you built a Ghost Wraith ship fleet. If you built a Ghost Dragon ship fleet, at least you can take 4 Ghost Dragon ships. That's kind of respectable at 8. If you took the Ghost Wraith ships, you've only got 4 carriers, which is 4 launch bays. It's not good, to say the least. It's actually the same number of carriers. You just have to round it out with other ships sort of as well. It's so bad, the Ghost Wraith ships. So I think you can get 5 Ghost Wraith ships, so that's 5 versus 8. I don't know where my math is right now, but still 5 versus 8 carrier bays. That's a humongous difference in terms of carrier capacity. Firestorm Dragon Ship, it's got the 3 pulsar cannon beam. This is actually quite viable just because it's got the 8 torpedoes that's firing off there. So you're capable of sort of getting the enemy down. One of the things that you can do is actually combo them, kind of. You can use the Starfall Dragon Ship to shred the shields of the enemy ships there. And then you can come in with the Firestorm Dragon Ship and just chunk their health down with the pulsars. Once their shields are down, they deal a little bit more damage, and then you can sort of go in for the double torpedo strike. So they can work paired off in that sort of way there. And I think that the Firestorm Dragon Ship, just because it's got so much torpedo launch power, is pretty viable. The reason I would still recommend taking Starfall Dragon Ships at that point is that if you're building these kinds of fleets, at this point in time, with all those torpedoes, you're going to be suffering against other Eldar, and for that you want macro weapons. So even in those sort of fringe cases, I would rather have the Dragon Ship over the Starfall over the Firestorm. Lastly, you've got the Moonray Dragon Ship. This thing's just so garbage. It's got the pulsars and it's got 2 carrier bays. Yeah, at the same time, you've got that extra carrier capacity over the Moonray, and you're not actually paying too much more for the Moonray Dragon or the Dragon Ship over the Wraith Ship. But what I find is problematic about this ship is that it's 3 sort of shots on its gun there. Once you've sort of run out of fighters and everything like that, it's pretty pathetic. It's not going to really put out the sort of damage that you can with, say, the Ghost Dragon Ship. So, lastly, we got the Battlecruiser of the Phoenix. This thing's just utter garbage. 420 points is way too much for what you're getting here. It's not that durable with 1,600 hull points. For a 420-point ship, that's just way, way too expensive for something that's this fragile. It's got 2 launch bays. It's got 2 pulsars, which are both pretty weak. It does not have the torpedoes. All it has in terms of upgrade for the macro weapons is it's got this extra 1 last cannon artillery. So instead of having 28 damage per second, compared to, say, the Ghost Dragon Ship, it's got 32. That's a very marginal increase. I really don't like the Phoenix ship. I think it's a waste of points. So anyway, the fleet that I generally take right now is just 5 Starfall Dragon ships. This is capable of dealing with pretty much anything out there. It's very effective. Now, one of the things that I would say is if you've got the micro and you're willing to sort of pay the extra effort, this is a better fleet in my opinion. It's also more interesting to play. 3 Prismatic Wraith ships replacing 2 of the Starfall Dragon ships. What you can get out of this is the Prismatic Wraith ships provide a little bit of extra striking power from the shadows there. They've got the ability to stealth. So you can come in from a surprise flank with these things and then just keep them around the enemies behind while your Starfall Dragon ships sort of pull the enemy apart and sort of tear them apart with their powerful macros once some fast elements. If your enemy fleet gets in complete disarray and ends up chasing your Starfall Dragon ships, they can sort of scoot around a little bit while your Prismatics just demolish them from behind and stuff like that. You can do some interesting and powerful things by having a couple stealth ships, but if you're just going for something that's fairly easy and simple to use and also just directly more powerful, then the 5 Starfalls is more powerful than including the Prismatic Wraith ships. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and select this fleet up. We're going to go ahead and pick our Disruption Bomb, our Polarized Field, and our Spirit Stone Targeting Node. Another thing that you can definitely opt to take is Polarized Field, King Crude Batteries. What you can do then is stand deep into a asteroid field. Just have yourself on reload stance and have your ships be invisible due to terrain. If he tries to go after you, you can sort of just run from one end of the asteroid belt, do a loop around, get to the other side of the asteroid belt, and keep forcing him to go through the asteroids to follow you. If he's taking damage from it because he didn't take his own polarized field equivalent, then you can deal a lot of damage through that sort of system there and just be a real annoying asshole. Not to mention, you can deal tons and tons of extra damage if you've got those rapid reload Kin Crude batteries. So in terms of matchups, this fleet does pretty well against just about everything out there. I think that the hardest matchups are currently the Dark Eldar, just because the Dark Eldar provide way too much value in sort of every circumstance. I think that they're one of the factions that probably needs a little bit of a nerf just because they're a little bit overvalued, or their ships are sort of overpowered a little bit. Craftworld Eldar versus the Corsairs. The Corsairs are just really weak right now. It's not necessarily the fact that the mechanically, you couldn't out-kite the Craftworld Eldar with the Corsairs. It's just that the Corsairs are overcosted and weak right now, and they rely too much on Pulsars, which are really, really bad in this matchup. So when you're up against other Corsairs, or other Eldar in general, you just generally go for Brace for Impact at the start there. Just until you see what's going on there. Going to make sure that we're sort of frontal engagement regardless, and we're going to set ourselves to short engagement. You know what? I don't know what to say to that, honestly. I really don't. Okay. Let's see if he's an idiot. Okay, I get the feeling like he's lying because I don't think anyone is going to take 2 Void Stalkers, because that is such a bad idea, but you never know. You never know. Anyway, we're going to keep our ships relatively on the sort of settings we got them here. We're just going to run up, capture this point here. A lot of the time I don't find it worth it capturing any points whatsoever with the Craftworld Eldar. You just go over and kill the enemy fleet to death. And, like, why bother doing anything else? But what he's probably actually taking is Vols, I guess, is what I would take if I was him, but I have no idea. So we're going to try and contest the 3 left points because they're sort of closer to each other. Okay, I'm seeing 4 torpedoes there, so we're probably, yeah, against Vols. I don't necessarily know why he fired those torpedoes like that, but whatever. Oh. I think I bumped into my own ships there a little bit, but that's fine. So we're going to get spotted here. I'm going to fly into the asteroid field to get unseen. There's the Void Stalker. All right. Engines criticals. That ship's dead. Go after the capital here. He hasn't run and he's lost his shields here, so yeah, if he thinks that's damage. Oh, he dodged my torpedoes, that son of a bitch. I'm on Brace for Impact, he's not, so. He doesn't realize, I think, that I've got 65 armor, and he does not. Just gonna get out of that. Oh, he still killed my admiral here. Just gonna rally everybody. Oh, I can't type anymore. So yeah, don't do what my opponent did there. You cannot stand and slug it out against Craftworld Eldar. They're probably one of the best factions at it. Yeah, so that's Craftworld Eldar. They're extremely powerful. They're a lot of fun to play. I don't know why I keep saying I'm bronze. It's like, and then it goes back here and it says gold, but whatever. Anyway, yeah, that's a look at them. You can use starting abilities and be extremely powerful with them. They're extremely straightforward. I don't know why my opponent tried to head-to-head with the Corsairs against Craftworlders. It's a bad choice. It's like, it is such a bad choice to try and go head-to-head against the Craft World if you're playing as the Corsair. It's a bad idea to go head-to-head with anybody as the Corsairs. But yeah, that was an interesting sort of matchup there. So as a faction, I think that this one's got a lot of potential. I think it actually needs a little bit of a nerf. But at the same time, I think some parts of it need buffs. It's going to be a stagnant and sort of boring faction to play as, unless you're like me, where just nothing makes you happier than seeing torpedoes going straight slamming into the broadside of a big, beefy enemy battleship. Like, that to me is just a moment of beauty. So that's never going to get tiring for me. But if you're a normal person who has normal taste in life, you're going to get tired of that sort of thing eventually. And because of that, you're going to want to play a faction that's kind of got a little bit more faction variety to it. Or maybe these guys eventually get worked around a little bit and are differentiated a little bit so that the pulsars are less trash, the carriers are a little bit less trash, or there's less reason to just take all torpedoes all the time. So anyway, hope you found this video enjoyable, and of course, as always, hope to see you guys all next time.